My name is Emma Carter. I'm 25, daughter of Colonel James Carter, and ever since my father was dishonorably discharged under false charges, I've lived for one purpose: retribution. Tonight, the desert wind chills me not because of the cold, but because I'm this close to confronting the man who betrayed him. In my pocket lies $2,500, 0 cents, the last of my life savings, scraped together to fund this mission. The ambulance siren's orange glow flickers over my fatigues as I crouch behind a rusted Humvee, every muscle in my body coiled like a predator. My M4 rifle feels heavy in my hands. A soft rustle in the darkness, whispers of betrayal carried on the wind. I inhale sharply, steadying my racing heart. My pulse pounds in my ears like thunderous battle drums. My being tightens. I will not fail him. Hitler, give you ready to follow my path of vengeance. But to understand how I came to this moment, bound by blood and honor, let's rewind to when, years ago, I was a truly curious little girl. My earliest memory is of my father lifting me onto the hood of his matte black Humvee, the Michigan sun warming our backs as he showed me how to load dummy rounds into an M4. I must have been 6 or 7. My tiny fingers fumbling with the cold metal clip as he guided my hand, saying, "Shape the future, Em, with discipline and honor." He was Colonel James Carter then, a decorated soldier fresh off tours overseas, and I was his little shadow, trailing him from the backyard obstacle course to the front porch, asking a million questions about tactics and courage. My mother, a registered nurse at Sparrow Hospital in Lansing, would often laugh as she bandaged my scraped knees after I practiced assault course jumps on her carefully tended flower beds. She'd tuck me into bed and whisper, "Your father builds soldiers. I'll build the heart that guides her." To 13-year-old me, their roles seemed like a well-rehearsed dance, steel and compassion entwined. By the time I turned 16, I'd spent 2 summers enrolled in junior ROTC at East Lansing. High tuition covered by my parents, nearly $12,000, 0 cents in fees, travel and uniforms, but every dollar felt like an investment in the promise I made to carry on my father's legacy. My best friend, Jake Turner, joined me in those drills. He was the kid who always trailed me around the campus coffee cart, the same one I would work at years later in Detroit. We'd share the earnings, $800, 0 cents, a month after taxes, to cover gas for weekend target practice. Jake would joke that he was my specimen for field medical training, laughing as I patched up his fake wounds with leftover gauze from Mom's stash. When I was 18, Dad brought me to Fort Campbell for my first real glimpse of military life. The base sprawled beneath us like a miniature city of tents and steel, and he said, "This is where the world decides what's worth fighting for." I still remember the bite of the November wind and the metallic tang of the mess hall coffee, the way soldiers moved with purpose. That day, I vowed to earn my place here not as a favor or a legacy, but on my own merit. College came next. ROTC scholarship, $10,000, 0 cents in book stipend, a dorm room overlooking the Red Cedar River. I balanced classes in political science and strategic studies with weekend shifts at Brew Republic, the Detroit cafe where I perfected my barista smile and learned that every dollar counts. I calculated every expense: $350, 0 cents rent, $200, 0 cents utilities, $150, 0 cents groceries, leaving me just $100, 0 cents for emergencies. When my car's alternator died at mile marker 23 on I-96, I drained my emergency fund, another $400. 0 cents gone to pay a tow truck, but I never complained. I was investing in my mission. Those years also yielded the first whispers of trouble. During my junior year, I noticed Dad pacing late at night, phone pressed to his ear, his voice low and urgent. One winter evening, I slipped into his study, a room lined with commendations and framed photographs of him shaking hands with generals, and found a sealed envelope stamped confidential. My heart pounded as I read his name and words like investigation, betrayal, and false testimony. I confronted him the next morning over breakfast. 2 scrambled eggs, toast, and wilted spinach, standard mess hall fare, and he looked at me with those steady blue eyes, the ones I inherited. He said, This isn't your fight yet. Go to class. Learn what you came here to learn." But I saw the tremor in his hands as he sipped coffee, heard the catch in his voice. That afternoon, I cornered my ROTC captain, a retired major with 40 years of service, and asked directly if he'd heard anything. He looked alarmed. "Emma, you're too close to this. Let it run its course." His warning only fueled my resolve. If they could do this to my father, Colonel James Carter, 30 years of honorable service, they could do it to anyone. I buried myself in research, poring over military tribunal records, interviewing Dad's old comrades on leave, cross-referencing chain-of-command emails. Each document I obtained, some official, some under the steel favors that cost me $1,200, 0 cents in anonymous donations, painted a clearer picture of who had set him up. I learned the name Colonel Robert Lansky, a man whose promotion hinged on my father's downfall. I traced Lansky's meeting with Senator Blake Whitman, who held the budget purse strings for military contracts, and discovered a $75,000, 0 cents exchange funneled through a shell corporation in Texas. Through it all, Jake remained my anchor. We sat in my tiny dorm room, spilled books and surveillance transcripts spread on the floor, as I read passages out loud. He'd record every interview I conducted, transcribe every file, and remind me to eat. When I skipped lunch before a 3 p.m. lecture, he'd shove a granola bar in my bag. "You need fuel for this war," he'd say. By the time graduation rolled around, I had a 3.8 GPA, a commission as a second lieutenant, and a dossier thick enough to sink a Navy ship. At my ceremony, as I stood at attention in crisp camouflage, I spotted my parents in the front row. Mom wiping tears, Dad standing tall but silent. I pressed my palm to my heart, feeling the weight of their sacrifices, the fuel behind my vengeance. I had become exactly who they raised me to be: disciplined, resourceful, unwavering. That summer, I deferred immediate deployment to allocate the $2,500, 0 cents, I'd saved from the cafe job and my scholarship's remaining stipend. I spent it on private investigators in the Middle East, analysts in Virginia, and encrypted satellite phones. Every dollar was a soldier in my army against Lansky and Whitman. I moved into a modest apartment in Detroit with a view of the Ambassador Bridge, the cables glowing like a spider web at dusk. I signed for a $800, 0 cents monthly lease, careful to budget $150, 0 cents for utilities, and $200, 0 cents for groceries, just enough to survive while I plotted. Looking back now, I see that those years of balancing barista shifts, ROTC drills, college lectures, and covert research were not just a prelude. They were the forging ground of my resolve. Every scrape on my knee, every late-night call, every dollar scraped from tips, all of it prepared me to stand in the desert tonight, rifle in hand, ready to confront the man who stole my father's honor. And that brings me full circle, from a girl perched on a Humvee playing soldier with her father, to a woman in full combat gear chasing justice halfway across the world. One final thought before we move on. If you've ever juggled multiple jobs, Saved every penny for a bigger goal, or fought for someone you love? Comment Emma below and let me know you understand what it means to carry your family's name on your shoulders. All that training and preparation felt unshakable until the first real mission tested every ounce of my conviction. My first deployment was supposed to cement everything I had trained for, a proving ground where discipline and determination would shine. The orders were clear: secure a 200-mile stretch of desert border known for smuggler activity, gather critical intelligence, and return unscathed. Our unit's operations budget for the mission was set at $50,000, 0 cents allocated to fuel convoys, rations for 12 soldiers, munitions, spare parts, and encrypted comms gear. In the days before departure, I pored over every logistical spreadsheet, double-checking that every gallon of diesel and every box of 5.56 mid-rounds was accounted for. I loaded my M4 rifle, adjusted my tactical vest straps, and felt the surge of confidence that comes from meticulous preparation. On the second morning, beneath a scorching sun, Lieutenant Olivia Brooks pulled me aside near the command tent. Her eyes were sharp as shattered glass. "Emma," she said, tapping a digital manifest. "These ammo counts don't match our field reports." I scanned her tablet. 200 rounds were missing. My pulse quickened as she laid out fuel receipts with mismatched serial numbers. 2 separate refills at Outpost 0 were signed off with different officer IDs, and one invoice listed $3,500, 0 cents, in black market surcharges. Pride battled alarm in my chest. If our supplies were compromised, every soldier's life could be at risk. I found Captain Marcus Lee during the brief lull before midday. He stood by an overturned water barrel, the horizon a blaze of sand. "Supply chains aren't perfect, Lieutenant," he said with a dismissive shrug. "Field conditions vary. Move on." His tone implied that an officer of my rank should not question his orders. But as Captain Lee walked away, a sliver of doubt pierced my resolver. Something wasn't right. That evening, Brooks and I met near the generator's Hume. She produced a crumpled paper receipt she'd retrieved from a supply crate, an unrecognized signature, and an annotation directing funds to account 209,887. "I traced this to an offshore shell," she whispered. My stomach turned. If our Starlight uplink logs had been tampered with, wiping out 2 hours of live feed, whoever did it had both access and motive. We compared notes under a flickering floodlight, each revelation more damning than the last. Within 24 hours, the desert's isolation amplified every concern. Our convoy convulsed off schedule. The ration pact dwindled faster than calculator. The generator sputtered when we needed it most. I documented every anomaly in my field notebook: altered ammo counts, fuel embezzlement, and communication blackouts. I could almost hear my father's steady voice reminding me that arm is measured in moments like these. But honor wouldn't repair our radios or replace stolen round. I needed hard evidence. The breakthrough arrived on day 5. Brooks intercepted a low-grade radio transmission between suspected smugglers and an unidentified handler. The voice barked, "Ensure the Red Line convoy arrives off-room at 200 hours for collection." That instruction matched no authorized maneuver in our orders. Only officers with battalion-level clearance could issue it. Cross-referencing personnel logs revealed the identical phraseology used in 2 confidential memos signed by Captain Lee. My stomach clenched. The man meant to protect us was orchestrating our downfall. With documented receipts totaling over $4,000, 0 cents in unexplained payments to phantom night shift duty, and the intercepted message, the case against Captain Lee was airtight. I alerted Brooks, and we agreed to confront him together. At dawn on day 6, beneath the skeletal remains of an old watchtower, I laid out the evidence: manipulated fuel invoices, missing ammunition, tampered satellite logs, and the smuggler's transmission. Captain Lee's face shifted from contempt to panic as I presented each document one by one. "Enough," he stammered, eyes darting. He attempted to regain control, ordering Brooks to stand down, but the soldiers gathered around us, 10 of the most senior corporal and sergeants, and I'd see their trust fracture. They demanded an explanation, and Lee had none. Lieutenant Brooks secured his comms credentials and instructed an escort to place him under arrest pending a formal tribunal. The desert wind seemed to hold its breath. Once Captain Lee was in custody, a tense calm settled over the unit. With supply lines restored and command integrity reinstated, we completed our mission on schedule. I stood at the edge of a ridge overlooking the secured zone, the weight of my M4 replaced by the gravity of what I'd uncovered. Betrayal often wears the face of authority, and miracles of teamwork require vigilance. I returned from that patrol changed. The desert's harsh lessons about resource scarcity and human greed sharpened my purpose: to protect every life under my command, no matter the cost. I had seen how easily trust could be manipulated, and how essential it was to question orders that threatened the very mission we swore to uphold. But nothing prepared me for the real betrayal when the person I trusted most revealed their hand in the dead of night. I never imagined that the deepest wound would come not from enemy fire, but from the man I trusted most. Captain Marcus Lee had stood by my side throughout training, praising my meticulous planning and unyielding discipline. He was the one who recommended me for the lead on our desert operation, who told me, "Emma, you've got what it takes to command." But on the 4th night of our patrol, under a moonless sky where even shadows seemed to hold their breath, I discovered the truth, and it shattered me. It began when Lieutenant Olivia Brooks intercepted a midnight radio transmission intended for smugglers. The static-laced voice barked, "Convoy Unit Red will divert at Waypoint Delta, ensure no pursuit." We cross-checked our GPS logs. No authorized change had been filed. Every soldier knew that deviating from the plan meant walking into an ambush. But the phraseology matched verbatim the confidential briefings Captain Lee had delivered to us before departure. My heart pounded as I confronted him behind the command Humvee, its headlights cutting through the darkness like judgmental eyes. "Marcus," I hissed, voice trembling but firm, "you set us up." He laughed, a brittle, humorless sound. "Emma, you've misunderstood." His eyes darted, searching for escape. "Operational security," he muttered. "I was ordered to test your loyalty." I pulled out the hard drive, a small encrypted device, holding recordings of his clandestine calls, GPS timestamps, even the fuel manifest showing $3,500, 0 cents, siphoned off at midnight refills. "Test my loyalty by endangering my team?" I demanded. He flinched. "You don't understand what I'm up against," he whispered. "They offered me a promotion, and I had to play along." He claimed he'd been coerced by Colonel Robert Lansky, my father's old rival, threatening exposure of a minor paperwork error that could ruin his career. But I saw the greed in Lee's eyes, the way his uniform creased without the conviction he once wore. "You sold us out for ambition," I said, voice rising. He looked away, ashamed. In that moment, a distant mortar shell exploded near our perimeter. The ground shook as our position took fire. Marcus froze, then barked orders as if nothing had happened. My teammates scrambled for cover, bullets ricocheting off sandbags. I realized how fragile our safety was, balanced on the trait of one corrupt soldier's mercy. When the fire sight subsided, I rallied my squad. "Check the west flank," I ordered Corporal Jenkins, whose steady hands had saved my life during training drills. Olivia, seal off the supply bunker. Every maneuver, every tactical choice, none of it mattered if our trust was broken. That night, Marcus's betrayal became combat gear heavier than any armor. By dawn, we had secured the zone and neutralized the ambush, but Marcus was in custody, shackled at the makeshift command post. I watched him from the command vehicle's hatch, the morning sun glaring off his helmet like a spotlight on guilt. Around us, the unit moved with a hollow efficiency, as if realization tinted every step. The field tribunal convened in the generator room, rows of sandbags forming bleachers. I presented the evidence: over $5,000, 0 cents in embezzled supplies, encrypted logs of unauthorized communications, and eyewitness accounts of his midnight rendezvous. Each piece painting a place, painting a portrait of calculated betrayal. Marcus sat silent, head bowed, as I laid out the betrayal he'd stitched into our mission. When Colonel Lansky's name surfaced, his fingerprints on the shell corporation that funneled the funds, my anger coalesced into icy resolve. Lansky would face justice, but first, I had to hold Marcus accountable. The tribunal stripped him of rank and initiated charges: dereliction of duty, treasonous collusion, and endangering a unit under his command. His military career dissolved in that sand-choked tent. Afterward, I returned to the Humvee where my squad gathered, faces hardened by confrontation, but eyes reflecting relief and renewed trust. Sergeant David Miller clapped me on the shoulder. "You did right by us," he said quietly. I nodded, still tasting bitterness in my mouth. "We finish what we started," I replied. "And we make sure this never happens again." That afternoon, I radioed base command. "Mission intact, traitor detained, area secure." The response crackled back. "Outstanding work, Lieutenant Carter. Protocol breaches will be investigated fully." I felt a flicker of pride, prove that justice can prevail even in lawless corners of the world. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe it was over. But deep down, I knew Marcus was only a pawn in a larger game. Lansky's web of corruption stretched far beyond our patrol, entangling politicians, contractors, and generals alike. This betrayal was the prologue to a war for my father's reputation, and I was determined to see it through. I collapsed onto the Humvee's roof as dusk settled, letting the weight of the day settle in my bones. My hand found the hard drive in my vest pocket, the cold metal a reminder of the evidence still to come. In the fading light, I silently vowed, for my father, for my team, I would dismantle Lansky's empire piece by piece. Scribed to follow every step of my journey, this fight is far from over. When the dust settled and the traitor was unmasked, I thought I'd feel triumphant. Instead, I felt the ground disappear beneath me. I thought exposing Captain Lee would bring closure, but instead, it opened a chasm inside me that I never saw coming. That night, after Lee was shackled, I returned to my dusty cot in the makeshift barracks. The hum of the generator felt like a mocking lullaby. My hands trembled as I peeled off my gloves, the grime under my fingernails a testament to every moment I'd fought to keep my promise. I sank onto the edge of the bunk, head in hands, and the weight of it all crashed down. My chest tightened with each breath. I replayed Lee's betrayal over and over. His laughter as I confronted him. The hollow glaze in his eyes. The silence of my teammates as they watched him taken away. What if I'd misread something? What if Lansky had set me up to take down Lee before moving on to destroy my father's reputation? The questions were more relentless than enemy fire. Sleep became a distant memory. I lay awake for 14 consecutive hours on that first night, mind racing through every detail. the mismatched fuel receipts totaling $5,000, 0 cents, the Shell Corporation cash flows, the intercepted transmissions. My helmet sat at the foot of the bunk, unused and unworn. I found myself compulsively reaching for it, as if strapping it on could lock away the doubts swirling in my brain. By the third sleepless night, my vision blurred. Shadows in the barracks elongated, twisting into forms I half recognized. Marcus Lee, advancing with a smirk. Colonel Lansky's silhouette lurking in corners. My heart pounded so loudly, I feared the walls would hear it. I lost track of time. Day bled into night, and I couldn't tell whether I was alive or just a ghost haunted by my own ideals. In a moment of desperation, I crawled out of the barracks and into the cold desert night. The temperature had plummeted to 45-degree Jeff, and each breath felt like razored air slicing through my lungs. I walked without direction, following the hum of the generators until I reached the perimeter wire. The bright lights from the watchtower above cut through the darkness, casting harsh shadows onto the sand. I lean against the chain-link fence, shoulders heaving, tears I didn't know I could shed sliding down my soot-streaked cheeks. For the first time, I allowed myself to grieve not just for the betrayal, but for the father who had taught me that honor was unbreakable. I pictured his steady gaze, his hands guiding mine on that Humvee's hood. I longed to hear his voice telling me everything would be all right, but he was hundreds of miles away, fighting his own battles. Blankly, I pulled out my field notebook and scribbled a single line, "I can't do this." The words felt true, a confession etched in ink across my soul. I stared at the page, willing the sentence to disappear, to be replaced with something stronger, something that reminded me why I started this journey. But nothing came. I folded the page over and tucked the notebook into my vest. At daybreak, Lieutenant Brooks found me slunked at the fence, dawn's pale light painting my silhouette. She knelt beside me, her voice gentle yet firm. "Emma, talk to me." I shook my head, unwilling or unable to voice the chaos inside. She didn't press. Instead, she produced a small package, a protein bar and a thermos of coffee. "Iwajas, you need to eat." I accepted the bar with shaking hands, the taste of the bar. As I forced bites down, Brooks slipped me a local medic's number and quietly informed me she'd scheduled a session with the unit psychologist, $600, 0 cents per consult, billed to my personal account. I blinked back fresh tears. It felt like too much, but also like the lifeline I'd refused. When I finally reported to the psychologist's tent, the medic introduced herself as Dr. Elena Ruiz. Her office was a single canvas wall decorated with colorful, hand-drawn mandalas, an odd contrast to the barracks' utilitarian gray. She sat across from me, notebook open. "Tell me what you're feeling," she prompted. I closed my eyes and for the first time let the words spill. Fear, regret, doubt, betrayal. I spoke of my father's legacy, how I'd carried his name like armor, only to find it dented and torn. I admitted I felt lost, unmoored without the clarity of a defined enemy. For 90 minutes, I unraveled. Every confession was painful, but each one chipped away at the paralysis gripping me. By the end of the session, I felt hollowed out but strangely lighter. Dr. Rui handed me a simple breathing exercise and instructed me to write 3 things I'm grateful for each morning. I left clutching the pamphlet, unsure but determined to try. That evening, as the sun dipped below the dunes, I sat on my cot and opened my notebook. Instead of mission data, I wrote, "My father's unwavering belief in me. Jake's loyalty through thick and thin. The stars above this desert, constant in an ever-changing world." My hand still trembled, but with each line, the knot in my chest loosened. I tucked the notebook away and slid into my helmet. The M4 rifle felt familiar again, not as a reminder of violence, but as a protector in my head. Tomorrow, I told myself, would be different. Tomorrow I would stand tall, not just as Emma Carter the soldier, but as Emma Carter the daughter, the avenger, the guardian of truth. In the darkest hour of my doubt, I found the first glimmer of hope, one that would ignite the fight within me once more. I woke before dawn, eyelids heavy but my resolve reawakening. The desert's pale light glinted off the dunes as I unzipped my kit bag and pulled out a fresh notebook. Channeling Dr. Ruiz's advice, I began to write. For the next hour, I spilled out every shadowed thought, 30 pages in total, capturing each fragment of doubt, each spark of defiance. By page 15, my chest felt lighter. By page 30, the chaos in my mind had crystallized into a strategy. Writing wasn't just catharsis, it was the first volley in reclaiming my purpose. That afternoon, Lieutenant Brooks handed me the registration forms for a 3-day leadership workshop at Fort Bragg, priced at $450, 0 cents. It was an investment in myself I initially resisted. My funds were earmarked for ongoing investigations, but something inside me whispered this was necessary. On day 1, I sat among 20 other junior officers in a windowless classroom, eyelids still rimmed with desert dust. The facilitator, a retired colonel with silver hair and a booming voice, guided us through trust-building exercises, blindfolded partners navigating obstacle courses, split-second decision drills, and critical thinking challenges under simulated fire. Each exercise mirrored my own recent trials, forcing me to confront my hesitation head-on. On the second morning, during a high-intensity scenario titled Chain of Command Breach, I realized how far I'd fallen psychologically. My partner hesitated at a simulated checkpoint, indecision breeding chaos. I stepped forward, voice calm but authoritative, directing him through the maze. His trust in my command, built in seconds, reminded me of the loyalty my team had shown on the desert patrol. By the workshop's midpoint, I was not just leading, I was embodying the leader I aspired to be. Resilient, decisive, and unshakable. That evening, back in my modest Detroit apartment, where I'd returned between assignments, I found an unexpected email from Jake Turner. The subject line read, "Still with you, always." He'd recounted how he'd printed out the 30 pages of my journal, taped them to his dorm room wall, and reread them when he faced his own setbacks as a paramedic student. He reminded me of the little victories, how I organized the cafe's inventory for $800, 0 cents/month, how I balanced school fees, how I'd never let him down. He closed with, "No matter what Lansky throws at you next, remember, you're the daughter of Colonel James Carter, and we are all behind you." The message arrived with a digital photo of his graduation cap-throwing moment, an image of triumph that stirred a warmth in my chest I hadn't felt in weeks. On the third and final day of the workshop, we tackled ethical dilemmas in combat. Presented with blurred scenarios where following orders clashed with moral imperatives, I drew upon my recent experiences with Captain Lee's betrayal. I argued passionately for accountability above blind obedience, citing specific breaches of honor and the cost in lives when authority corrupts. My peers nodded, eyes reflecting respect and understanding. When the facilitator announced me as Most Improved Leader, awarding me a certificate and a handwritten note, "In adversity, you discover your true strength," I realized recovery wasn't about erasing the past, but integrating it into a stronger self. That night, I returned to the desert. The workshop had ended, but my mission had only deepened. I budgeted the remaining $200, 0 cents in my account to book return flights, determined to channel this newfound clarity into dismantling the conspiracy against my father. I reread my journal pages under the ghostly glow of generator lights, each entry guiding the next steps in my investigation. The breathing exercises Dr. Ruiz taught me became my ritual before every battle. A steady inhale counting to 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, repeat. In those moments, the roar of betrayal quieted into a manageable hum. Back on base, I called in favors $1,200, 0 cents wire transfers to cover the costs of decrypting Lansky's offshore records, $800, 0 cents to secure satellite imagery analysts in Virginia, and a $450, 0 cents subscription for encrypted comms with Jake and Dr. Ruiz. Every dollar I spent now felt like ammunition in the war for truth. When Lieutenant Brooks noticed my purposeful stride and calm demeanor, she remarked, "Emma, you look unstoppable." I smiled, knowing she was right. The spark of recovery wasn't just a fleeting ember, it was a raging fire. That weekend, I organized a mini workshop for my squad. Under the shade of a solitary mesquite tree, I led a session on stress management and resilience, teaching them the breathing exercises and journaling technique. Watching seasoned soldiers, men and women who'd seen the harshest battle, scribble notes and share vulnerability aren't exactly right with our professionals. They're partners in survival. By the end of that week, I felt reborn. The notebook's final pages listed not only my grievances but also actionable plans. Interview Colonel Whitman next Tuesday. Subpoena the Shell Corp's bank records by Thursday, and prepare a public statement for media outlets by month's end. My mission had transformed from raw vengeance into a disciplined campaign for justice. In the aftermath of my emotional collapse, I found that recovery sprouted from embracing support through journaling, structured learning, loyal friends, and professional guidance, and repurposing pain into clarity. Each tool I adopted became part of my arsenal. Words to organize thoughts, workshops to rebuild confidence, emails to remind me of my why. No longer was I adrift. I was a weapon honed by adversity, ready for the next challenge. Transition to Section 7. Turning the tables, armed with renewed purpose and sharpened skills, I began crafting the counter-strike that would topple Lansky's empire. When I returned to base after the leadership workshop, I carried more than fresh strategies. I carried a plan. I settled at the command tent's folding table, spreading out my journal, the hard drive, and the encrypted satellite uplink orders I'd intercepted. My fingers traced red lines I had drawn through Lansky's network of shell corporations, financial trails extending from Texas to the Cayman Islands, each transaction marked with the exact amount: $75,000, 0 cents, $50,000, 0 cents, $20,000, 0 cents. This was no longer a scavenger hunt, it was a surgical strike. Day one of my counter-offensive began quietly. I radioed Captain Ortiz in logistics and, under the guise of standard supplies requisition, inserted a request for an audit protocol on our unit's assets. Unusual but defensible given recent discrepancies. The audit would force the finance office to expose any phantom payments. Meanwhile, I dispatched Olivia Brooks and Sergeant David Miller on a training exercise to the nearest forward operating base, knowing their absence would leave the supply manager vulnerable to my next move. At 9:45 hours, I slipped into the rear office of Supply Sergeant Harlan Green. He was a meticulous man whose ledger should have matched the base's digital records, but I had already flagged $3,500, 0 cents, in black market taxes, and 2 phantom fuel deliveries totaling $7,200, 0 cents. Sitting across from him, I smiled and said, "Sergeant Green, I'm conducting a readiness review. Care to walk through these entries with me?" His eyes flickered, ears turning pink. He nodded and began reciting figures from memory, unaware I had cross-checked every line. By lunchtime, I had contradictions documented in my tablet. One invoice signed by Green at midnight, another in his handwriting but dated 2 days later. I casually mentioned an upcoming external inspection by the Inspector General's office, watching as Green paled. He stammered excuses, sweat beading along his hairline. I leaned in, voice steady. "Sergeant, I want to help you square these numbers before it goes higher." His shoulders slumped, and he confessed that Captain Lee had directed him to bill phantom shipments to cover operational shortfalls. He'd been paid $1,200, 0 cents in cash, for his cooperation. With Green's admission, I had the ammunition I needed. I initiated secure comms to secure Kerner, now working as a private satellite analyst in Virginia, sending him Green's testimony and my compiled data. Within 2 hours, he decrypted offshore records tying Green's cash payments back to Lansky's shell accounts. I archived everything on the hard drive, creating an unassailable dossier. That afternoon, I called a meeting in the command tent. My squad, 12 soldiers hardened by desert patrols, gathered around. I laid out the mission. Our objective isn't just to secure territory, it's to expose corruption that endangers every soldier under our command, including my father. I presented Green's confession, the satellite logs, and intercepted communications. Their eyes widened as the web of deceit unfolded. When I pressed the play icon on my tablet, and Lee's voice crackled through the speakers, ordering fuel diversions to Slate account, 209,887, silence enveloped us. Sergeant Miller rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Lieutenant, what's our next move?" he asked. I pointed to a list I had drafted that morning. Secure Green's signed affidavit and forward it to the Inspector General. Detain any officer implicated in the diversion of funds for interrogation. Coordinate with base legal to prepare sealed charges against Lansky and Whitman. Plan a public release of evidence through an accredited journalist to ensure transparency. We moved with precision. Brooks led a team to escort Green under guard to the IG team arriving at 1800 hours. Miller and I oversaw the securing of the supply office, seizing digital logs and paper records. Within 4 hours, 5 officers were in temporary custody, including one close associate of Colonel Lansky. Each detainment drawn from my dossier. That night, I monitored the IG's initial debrief, listening through secure channels as the investigators expressed shock at the breadth of Lansky's network. They mentioned $250,000, 0 cents in misappropriated funds, half directed to defense contractors linked to Senator Blake Whitman. Hearing those numbers, I felt a surge of vindication but also knew the real fight was just beginning. The next morning, I slipped into the makeshift media center set up near the runway. I met with Lieutenant Colonel Harris, the IG's liaison, and shared the evidence package hard drive, Green's affidavit, decrypted transaction ledgers, and satellite imagery. He reviewed each item, nodding gravely. "Lieutenant Carter, your work is exemplary. We'll proceed with sealed warrants immediately." His thanks felt hollow to me. Justice moved slowly through bureaucratic channels. I needed a public counterpunch. By midday, I contacted Erica Morgan, an embedded journalist with Military Times. Over encrypted email, I sent her a summary and file links. She responded within the hour. "Understood. I'll go live at 1700 with a special report, how one lieutenant exposed high-level military corruption." Every word was vetted and time-stamped. At 1700 hours, the Military Times website exploded with the headline and a detailed exposé. Social media lit up with shares, over 10,000 retweets in the first 2 hours. Comments poured in, veterans outraged, analysts praising the courage, and families of soldiers demanding wider investigations. I watched as Lansky's photo appeared with the caption, "Suspected architect of military fraud." My heart pounded as I realized our tactical counterstrike had become a public landslide. Back on base, the atmosphere was electric. Soldiers approached me with gratitude, some slapping my back, others offering quiet nods of respect. I felt the weight of their trust pressing on my shoulders, and the promise I had made to my father coursing through my veins. We had not only uncovered corruption, we had turned Lansky's own weapons, money, and influence against him. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I stood atop the Humvee where my journey began. In my hand was my father's first commendation, to me a folded note reading, "Proud of you, M. Keep your honor intact." I unfolded it, the paper soft with use, and placed it against my heart. Below me, the base glowed with restored integrity, every light a testament to the sacrifice and solidarity of honest soldiers. Share this story if you believe that one person's resolve can topple an empire of corruption. While the world watched my public blaze of justice, a quieter story unfolded behind the scenes, one that revealed the personal cost of this crusade. My younger brother, Ethan Carter, is 22 and deeply immersed in his nursing program at Wayne State University. Since he was a teenager, he has balanced academic rigor with part-time shifts at Detroit Medical Center, earning roughly $900.00 a month to cover tuition installments and living expenses. His student loans now total about $25,000.00, and he manages them meticulously, setting aside $200.00 from each paycheck. Despite these financial pressures, Ethan's compassion has never wavered. I still remember the time he used $150.00 of his savings to purchase cold packs for a weekend free clinic outreach, insisting that injured patients deserve comfort even in makeshift tents. While waged a war against corruption in distant deserts, Ethan waged his own quiet battles in sterile hospital corridors. He endured grueling 12-hour shifts, comforting families and administering critical care. Tucked inside was a photocopy of his bank statement, showing a surprise deposit of $800.00. He had donated his entire month's earnings, choosing to subsist on basic cafeteria meals so I could use the money for decrypting more evidence. Even now, I can't read that bank statement without my throat tightening. Late one night, another letter arrived, this one containing detailed findings from Ethan's clinical research on emergency department efficiency, a project he had funded with $1,200.00 in nursing scholarship grants. He included transcripts of interviews with ER staff and a summary of his data analysis, which he believed could streamline hospital operations and save hospitals thousands of dollars. His dedication reminded me that integrity and sacrifice take many forms beyond battlefields. In our brief satellite calls, his voice became my lifeline. "Emma, remember to breathe," he'd say, grounding me when the weight of my mission threatened to consume me. Even in the fiercest firefights, I carried Ethan's letters in my vest, their pages dog-eared and coffee-stained. Each number he shared $25,000.00 in loans, $900.00 monthly income, $200.00 saved, $150.00 for cold packs, $800.00 support, $1,200.00 research. Funds became a testament to resilience and generosity. Long after the world lauded my tactical victories, I realized the true testament to my journey lay in Ethan's unwavering belief in me and in the lessons he taught about kindness, perseverance, and the power of small acts to change lives. Follow to receive behind-the-scenes insights and extra stories from my path of vengeance and redemption. Now, with my family spirit fueling me, I return to finish the mission, bringing Colonel Lansky's schemes crashing down. My younger brother, Ethan Carter, is 22 and deeply immersed in his nursing program at Wayne State University. Since he was a teenager, he has balanced academic rigor with part-time shifts at Detroit Medical Center, earning roughly $900.00 a month to cover tuition installments and living expenses. His student loans now total about $25,000.00, and he manages them meticulously, setting aside $200.00 from each paycheck. Despite these financial pressures, Ethan's compassion has never wavered. I still remember the time he used $150.00 of his savings to purchase cold packs for a weekend free clinic outreach, insisting that injured patients deserve comfort, even in makeshift tents. While I waged a war against corruption in distant deserts, Ethan waged his own quiet battles in sterile hospital corridors. He endured grueling 12-hour shifts, comforting families and administering critical care. A week after I exposed Captain Lee, a letter arrived via encrypted courier, his handwriting crisp. "Sis, you taught me that honor is more than a word. You're not alone." And tucked inside was a photocopy of his bank statement, showing a surprise deposit of $800.00. He had donated his entire month's earnings, choosing to subsist on basic cafeteria meals so I could use the money for decrypting more evidence. Even now, I can't read that bank statement without my throat tightening. Late one night, another letter arrived. This one containing detailed findings from Ethan's clinical research on emergency department efficiency, a project he had funded with $1,200.00 in nursing scholarship grants. He included transcripts of interviews with ER staff and a summary of his data analysis, which he believed could streamline hospital operations and save hospitals thousands of dollars. His dedication reminded me that integrity and sacrifice take many forms beyond battlefield. In our brief satellite calls, his voice became my lifeline. "Emma, remember to breathe," he'd say, grounding me when the weight of my mission threatened to consume me. Even in the fiercest firefights, I carried Ethan's letters in my vest, their pages dog-eared and coffee-stained. Each number he shared $25,000.00 in loans, $900.00 monthly income, $200.00 saved, $150.00 for cold packs, $800.00 surprise support, $1,200.00 research funds became a testament to resilience and generosity. Long after the world lauded my tactical victories, I realized the true testament to my journey lay in Ethan's unwavering belief in me and in the lessons he taught about kindness, perseverance, and the power of small acts to change lives. Follow to receive behind-the-scenes insights and extra stories from my path of vengeance and redemption. Now, with my family spirit fueling me, I returned to finish the mission, bringing Colonel Lansky's schemes crashing down. I laid out the final confrontation like every other mission: methodical, calculated, relentless. Colonel Robert Lansky believed he was untouchable. A decorated 30-year career built on whispers of betrayal and a network of bribery that stretched from Pentagon corridors to Texas oil fields. He'd used forged emails, shell corporations, and paid off officers with checks totaling $75,000.00 to orchestrate my father's disgrace. But in the end, even the most intricate web unravels. It began with the Inspector General's sealed warrants executed at Lansky's private estate outside Washington. Agents discovered a trove of over 50 incriminating emails, each stamped with his alias, R.C. Havoc, followed by instructions like, ensure discretion and redirect funds. One chain of messages detailed a plan to funnel $50,000, 0 cents, in military contracts through Senator George. When they seized Lansky's laptop, they found folders labeled Operation Ironclad, containing reconnaissance photos of my patrol routes, forged orders, and draft memos to silence whistleblowers. The public downfall was swift. I flew to Washington to testify at the preliminary hearing alongside my father. The courtroom was packed, 15 officers in uniform, journalists, and families of soldiers who had suffered under Lansky's schemes. Prosecutor Evans presented the damning evidence, the emails, bank records tracing Shell Corp payments in the Cayman Islands, and sworn statements from Captain Lee and Sergeant Green. Each witness described how Lansky had manipulated them. Lee's ambition exploited, Green's vulnerability corrupted and turned them into unwilling accomplices. Then came the ledger. Evans held up a torn notebook page, recovered from Lansky's safe, a handwritten list of names and amounts: $5,000, 0 cents, to Lieutenant Barnes, $10,000, 0 cents, to Major Phillips, $15,000, 0 cents, to an unknown intelligence officer. The totals added up to $75,000, 0 cents exactly. Among the names was Senator Whitman, who turned ashen when his own payment was read aloud. He attempted to invoke executive privilege, but the judge refused, citing the severity of the allegations. When the judge announced that both Lansky and Whitman were to be detained pending a full trial, the courtroom erupted. Reporters snapped photos, cameras flashed, and social media ignited with hashtags like Carter Justice and Military Cleanup. In the first 24 hours, Erica Morgan's expose on Military Times garnered over 25,000 shares, and news outlets ran the story under headlines like How a Lieutenant Dismantled a General's Empire and Carter vs. Lansky. The scandal shaking the Pentagon. Back on base, I read the headlines aloud to my squad over secure video link. My father's pride was palpable through the screen. "You've done more than salvage my reputation," he said, eyes glistening. "You've reminded everyone why honor matters." My chest tightened with emotion. The vengeance I'd sought had evolved into vindication and reform. In the days that followed, the Military Ethics Council convened an emergency session. I was invited to share my experiences both in the field and in court to help draft new anti-corruption protocols. We debated supply chain audits, encrypted evidence tracking, and whistleblower protections. I recommended rotating oversight officers every 90 days and mandating Randall financial reconciliations for any mission exceeding $20,000, 0 cents in expenditure. On a crisp Friday morning, I visited my brother Ethan at the Detroit Medical Center. He showed me his latest research on emergency room efficiency, a project he'd funded with $1,200, 0 cents from scholarship grants. His eyes lit up as he described how streamlining patient intake could save hospitals thousands of dollars annually. I saw in him the same dedication to service that had driven me across deserts and courtrooms. That evening, I stood beneath the steel spans of the Ambassador Bridge, its cables glowing like a spiderweb against the night sky. In my hand was my father's first commendation, a folded note reading, "Proud of you, M. Keep your honor intact." I pressed it against my heart, reflecting on how far we'd come from a childhood spent on his Humvee's hood to a courtroom that echoed with the fall of a corrupt empire. Colonel Lansky's schemes lay in ruins, his name disgraced, and his power extinguished. But the greatest victory wasn't in his downfall. It was in restoring faith for my family, for my squad, and for every soldier who believed in the principles we vow to uphold. The mission was complete. I, Emma Carter, had fulfilled the promise I made under the desert sky: justice for my father, and a legacy of integrity that would endure long after the dust settled. With Lansky's empire dismantled, the real work began, turning lessons learned into lasting change for myself, my family, and the institution I pledged to protect. When Colonel Lansky and Senator Whitman were formally detained, I felt the tide finally turn. Standing beside my father in that packed courtroom, my hand resting on his shoulder, I realized the mission I embarked upon beneath a desert moon had grown far bigger than a daughter's vengeance. It became a crusade to restore integrity, not only to his name, but to an institution built on sacrifice and trust. In that moment, every sleepless night, every dollar scraped from barista shifts and scholarship stipends, every tear shed beneath the barracks' harsh lights, suddenly found its purpose. In the weeks that followed, I was invited to speak at the Pentagon Ethics Symposium. Before an audience of 200 military leaders, civilian policymakers, and journalists, I recounted my journey from a 6-year-old clambering onto my father's Humvee to a lieutenant exposing a network of corruption worth over $250,000, 0 cents, in misappropriated funds. I spoke honestly about my emotional collapse, the $600, 0 cents psychological sessions, and the tactical decisions that enabled Sergeant Green to confess $1,200, 0 cents, in hush money payments. I outlined the breathing exercises and daily journal prompts that helped me reclaim my resolve. At the end, I paused and looked across the room, voice steady, and said, "Integrity is not a gift conferred by rank. It is earned through every choice we make, however small." The room erupted in applause, and I felt the weight of those 2 words, "thank you," more profoundly than any commendation. Shortly thereafter, I received news that my ROTC Scholarship Foundation had awarded me an additional $10,000, 0 cents grant to fund research into military accountability measures. With those funds, I partnered with Dr. Elena Ruiz to pilot a program that integrates mental health check-ins, anonymous reporting channels, and financial audit training into officer development. Our first cohort of 20 young lieutenants completed the program last month, and 85% reported improved confidence in identifying ethical breaches before they escalate. Watching their final presentations, I saw in their eyes the same determination that once fueled my solitary investigations. Back home in Detroit, my brother Ethan and I co-hosted a community forum at Wayne State University, inviting veterans, students, and local lawmakers to discuss systemic reform. Over a packed hall of 200 attendees, Ethan shared his nursing research on emergency room efficiency. How reallocating $1,200, 0 cents, in annual supplies budget could reduce patient wait times by 20%, while I outlined practical steps for whistleblower protection. Together, we demonstrated that service to country and service to community are simply 2 sides of the same coin. On base, I recommended rotating financial oversight officers every 90 days for any deployment exceeding $20,000, 0 cents, in operational costs. The Inspector General's office has already instituted this policy for 3 units, resulting in 0 supply discrepancies in the past quarter. A record, unmatched in 5 years. Small changes, I learned, ripple outward and rebuild trust, one policy at a time. Looking back, the greatest lesson was this: vengeance can ignite a powerful fire, but justice requires tending that fire with wisdom and compassion. I had chased shadows across continents and held traitors accountable, but the real victory lay in transforming my pain into reform that protects every soldier and every family impacted by corruption. Tonight, as I tuck my father's folded note, "Proud of you, M. Keep your honor intact," into my journal, I understand that a legacy isn't a burden, it's a promise. A promise that no matter how dark the path, integrity and perseverance will light the way. If you carry a legacy on your shoulders, remember the choices you make today shape not only your future, but the futures of countless others. If Emma's journey inspires you, like and share the story, and comment the lesson you'll carry forward.